That's talking about mobility generally, but let's include infrastructure or everything else that goes into that. And there's a lot. But what are some of the key areas coming into this cohort selection process that you guys thought, hey, here are things that we either need to be playing in or that the market needs, or what are some of those key themes that you've been going after? And feel free if you want to use this to talk about specific examples of kind of companies you found, and maybe that's a useful case study opportunity as well.
Cool. Yeah, like there's definitely sort of in mobility, there's probably, give it maybe 5 or so big trends that we're really, where we have, if you think about LACI's unique selling proposition, I think our sweet spot is, we're really good at pilots, we're really good at partnerships, and we're really good in that policy linkage. So, 3 Ps, pilots, policy, partners, whatever you want to call it. And so the technical spaces that we're tracking, have one of those elements where we say, hey, by piloting something, we can prove a market. There's a policy angle here, and we've got deep corporate and government partners that can help bring this to life. So that informs a little bit how we think about what we're looking for. One thing that we're already pretty deeply involved in as a theme is curb management, which in my mind falls under the broader umbrella of sort of congestion pricing and allowing cities and others to say, hey, the road, whether you're parking on it or driving on it, is not free, and to use it at peak times or when you're highly polluting or whatever else, there's going to be a fee associated with it. There's a lot of European countries who probably have more work done on this progress. Singapore's done some amazing work. And, congestion pricing is a topic that's taking off in the US slowly, but surely in cities like New York and LA. And as a sort of parallel topic, curb management is starting to really take off. This is the notion that basically, again, if you think back about the history of the curb, Gen 1 might have been Uber and Lyft having a business model that says like, hey, we're going to send out all these drivers and they're going to be using the curb to pick up and drop off. But, there were some externalities to that, right? Congestion has increased in cities rather than decreased because there's a lot of curb usage by these organizations. And then you had, the next wave was sort of Bird and Lime saying, hey, we're going to use the curb for scooters. We'll just store, the scooters there. And then, the next wave started with COVID, which was, e-commerce was already popular before COVID, but exploded after, and Amazon, UPS, and others using the curb to do drop off of packages. So curb management is a digital resource that allows cities to basically say, hey, forget the parking meter. That's an outdated concept. We're going to have a digital and automated way of gatekeeping the curb, and we're going to price it differently based on, are you a polluting vehicle or not? We're going to price it differently based on your use case. All that sort of stuff. And that was actually a key ingredient. I mentioned pilots. One of our bigger pilots was creating the nation's first zero emissions delivery zone. We did that in Santa Monica. We're now doing another one in the city of LA, and we're actually partnering with Pittsburgh to bring that same technology to LA. This notion of the curb is a resource. And although it doesn't sound directly like climate tech, it has huge GHG impacts, because if you can use curb management as a discipline to nudge local fleets towards zero emissions, all the better. And so we have a company in the portfolio who actively does that. It's called Automotus, and they're the partner we've worked with in Santa Monica, Los Angeles, and they're now deploying in Pittsburgh.
Can you speak a bit further about kind of how does that actually work? So what's that service offering look like for a zero emission drop off zone or loading zone?
Yeah. So it's digital surveillance, and then automated ticketing to the automated ticketing to the fleet owner, right? So if an Amazon truck pulls up in front of an apartment building, Amazon actually and UPS and others are generally actually excited about paying for access. If you look at the logistics network of UPS and others, they rely on microseconds of deployment. And being able to pre-reserve a curb or know that it's going to be available is hugely valuable to them. And so, using camera technology and AI and other things, you can sort of track exactly who's at the curb and then send a fee for using the curb to the fleet owner.
And two quick thoughts here, and feel free to share yours if you have any. But not a huge fan of the term zero emission, but
Yeah.
just because we're talking about zero tailpipe emissions and not zero full life cycle. With that being said, yeah, I understand the intent is, especially in big urban areas, removing the tailpipe emissions is huge. Similarly, I'm not fully convinced that full battery electric vehicles are the solution for all use cases, but for most last mile delivery and commercial applications, especially these last mile delivery where there's a lot of idling, there's a lot of acceleration and slow moving, and there's defined routes and defined areas where you're returning the charge. I think that's all a home run, and that should be fully electrified as soon as possible. So, and I say that just because I don't know, anyone who's been listening for a while maybe is guessing that, yeah, I'm not a huge all the way EV enthusiast, but I think this is the type of application where we should be going all in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So
last mile is definitely, much easier to decarbonize than, long haul trucking, right? That is a much harder, issue to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
So curb management, I think then linked to curb management, actually linked to a topic you just brought up is last mile logistics by smaller zero emissions form factors. This is the notion that actually, sometimes in a city, you don't even need a Rivian van. You might need an e-cargo bike towing a trailer. So an example in our portfolio is a company called ERV. It's a high performance e-cargo bike with a trailer behind it that can tow, 1,000 pounds. And so they're deployed in New York and LA, and that's a much more nimble way of getting through, traffic by being in the bike lane than by being in the car lane. So certainly last mile delivery, in addition to just decarbonizing, is going towards smaller form factors. Another big topic that we're focused on is charging solutions for people who live in multi-tenant dwellings. And that's just a fancy way of saying apartments and condos. If you're a private homeowner, you have a lot of autonomy on your choice if you want to install a charger at your home. If you live in an apartment or condo, you have a lot less autonomy. There's so many other issues, and we just see a lot of challenges for people who live in apartments and condos. If they choose to, want to get an electric car, how do they do that? Well, there's the HOA to deal with, there's whatever else, and so that's a really thorny problem. And we're continually excited about trying to find solutions in that space. An example of a company we work with in our portfolio on that topic is a company called Hive. It is an EV subscription targeted to folks who live in apartments or condos, and it's all inclusive. It includes the vehicle, but access to charging. And so sort of the secret sauce that they're working on is driver location and where there's walkable overnight public charging availability, right? So if somebody says, great, I'm driving for Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, I live in an apartment building, I can pay a certain dollar per mile guaranteed price with Hive, and I walk 2 blocks, to get the vehicle and have it be charged overnight. So a lot of data analytics to figure out where drivers might be, where charging might be, and bridging that gap. But all that said, I think that remains a really big topic. If we're going to get people in apartments and condos access to charging, it's going to require a lot of creativity on just different business models and different solutions. And then another one that you and I just kind of touched on is just like heavy duty decarbonization. If you think about where we're located here in LA, the Port of LA and Long Beach represent like 40% of the containerized goods coming into the US. Both of those ports have made a commitment to go zero emissions by 2035. That brings with it a huge host of questions about how you do it, not just from the port. They're not just talking about the port operations, port handling equipment, but the trucks coming into those. And there's huge implications about the drayage trucks that might be leaving those ports and where they're going in a short distance to just drop off that container, drop off that material at a local warehouse. And that's a really thorny issue, right? Like it's not going to be easy, but it's probably, as you look at different form factors of mobility, it's pretty easy to figure out how to get a electric battery powertrain into a passenger car. Sort of figuring out the business model and whatever on a heavy duty truck between the fueling and the powertrain it's a lot harder. But it's super urgent when you think about the city of LA and some of the air pollution challenges we have that are driven by diesel trucks going up and down the highway to get to the ports.
Are you guys considering, so like I think of the Port of LA and the Project Portal from Toyota and other things with hydrogen being evaluated as a method, is that part of the realm of consideration, or are you guys for the most part focused on the battery electric side of decarbonization?
I think we're focused on the battery side of decarbonization, but we're definitely partnering with folks on joint projects. So you might have heard of the EDA's Build Back Better project, which is a big infrastructure project sponsored by the EDA, sort of, tens of millions available to cities. And we're one of the partners for the LA application, which includes an element of heavy duty that's got both electric and hydrogen as part of the application.
Cool. And so I think if I'm keeping score correctly, that's 4 topics. I got curb management, last mile with smaller form factors, charging for multifamily, multi-unit dwellings, heavy duty decarbonization.
Yeah, 5th one to me is just the continual rise of and sort of business needs around e-bikes. So this is less about goods movement and more about people movement. E-bikes definitely experienced a spike during COVID. You've seen the valuations of companies like Rad Power Bikes, et cetera. And we expect that to continue. Denver just had a really cool policy on giving folks, as a city, giving folks a rebate on e-bikes for ownership. We think there's a pretty big opportunity if you really get people excited about e-bikes to reduce just the usage of private cars. Maybe somebody doesn't give up their private car, but they just drive it less, and that has a big climate impact. So we have a company in our portfolio who manufactures e-bikes called Zero Bikes, but I imagine we'll find other potential ways to engage in that space. The other thing that I think is going to be really important on that front, which again aligns with policy, is no matter where you look in the transportation supply chain, whether you're talking about heavy duty, passenger cars, or even e-bikes, there's probably some supply chain vulnerabilities that we've really better understood in the last couple of years. COVID, made that very clear. But there's also rising geopolitical tensions, and as you look at a lot of the battery supply chain, it's probably more dependent on Asia than is, in particular China, than is the right policy move long term for the U.S. And so one of the things we're expecting, whether you're talking about e-bikes or batteries in general, is a nearshoring of manufacturing, whether it's final assembly or components to Mexico, US, and Canada as part of the need to have more local and resilient supply chains for our transportation manufacturing needs.